Hello and welcome to another video. In this one, we're going to be talking about TypeGuard, which is part of Python typing. And I've been asked quite a few times to explain this one. But basically, TypeGuard is new in Python 3.10, and it allows you to do custom narrowing of types. Now, narrowing, I should probably explain. And in order to explain that, let's set up a virtual environment and show you a few examples of narrowing. Event activate, pip install mypy. Sure, that'll be good enough. And if we open up a file, I can show you a few examples of narrowing. All right, so the first narrowing, and perhaps the most common narrowing, is a way to say that a type is either true or false, or none or non-none. So you may have like a value that is either a str or a none, and let's just say you want special behavior if it is none, otherwise you want special behavior if it's a string. So for instance, and this code's gonna be garbage, so don't really super worry about it. You might say if x is none, none. In this case, the type checker knows that x is always going to be none. We can do that we can show that by doing reveal type. And in this else case, it knows that the type of this must be string. So it's string, and even we can use string methods. I never use plus with strings. I always use f strings, but nonetheless. If we run the type checker on this, we'll see that mypy knows that this is always none, and mypy knows that this is always string. This is an example of narrowing. Basically, the type checker looks at if or while or match or any of the ways that you can do control flow in Python, and it knows that the type must be a particular subtype of the wider type initially. So it narrows the type to a more specific type. Now, another example of narrowing that the type checker understands is instead of explicitly testing for none, you can do a truthy test. And so it'll know here, we'll just leave reveal type in there. We'll know here that in the truthy case that it must be a string. It can't be none, and it can't be the empty string. However, in the else case, it still hasn't completely narrowed this type because the empty string also satisfies the else case of this. See, if we do that, you'll see that it knows this is str, and it thinks this is a union of str, an optional, essentially. And so that's that's basically what narrowing is. Now, what TypeGuard allows you to do is it allows you to make custom narrowing functions. So the narrowing that the type checkers understand is fairly basic. Truthiness, none checks, is instance, is subclass. Those are basically the ones that type checkers handle. But you might have a more complicated narrowing. Like maybe you want to check that it's a particular sublist or subtype of a list, or it's a type dict or something like that. So you might want to define your own custom narrowing functions. I'll give you an example here. Let's say that we have x, which is a list of str, or it's a list of int. And we want to do a different behavior based on those. So maybe got commands and then empty string.join x. Maybe we started with this code and the type checker was like, oh, you can't join an iterable of int. Okay, so we need to have a special case here. So we want some sort of thing that's is list of strings. Then we do this. Otherwise we do got numbers, and then we actually have to convert those to strings. Y for y in x. I don't know, silly example like this. Oh, of course, we don't have is list of strings and then lists, which is going to be, let's just say list of object to bool. Return all is instance x str for x in list. This might be an example of an implementation that checks that our particular list contains entirely strings. Argument 1 of is list of strings has incompatible type union list str list int expected list object. Oh, this is a variance issue. So we have to be a little bit more specific. We have to say is instance list and this. Okay, that'll at least satisfy that function. But MyPy still doesn't know that we're narrowing properly here, so it's still complaining here. And so what TypeGuard allows us to do, it allows us to take our custom narrowing function and have the type checker understand it. So instead of returning bool here, we'll do from typing import TypeGuard, and we will use TypeGuard with the type that we're narrowing it to. In this case, list str. So the type checker knows that if this function returns true, then the first argument that was passed into it must be of list str. So if we run this now, you'll see that MyPy now understands that we have properly narrowed the type here. We can even do reveal type of x and show that it works there. Now TypeGuard always works on the first argument. You can, of course, have it support more arguments here. So let's say that we wanted to make a generic version of this. Okay, import type var t equals type var t is list of type list, which will be sequence object. You can even just say object. No, we can narrow from object to any type if we want to do it here. Maybe that's a better way to write this one up here. But anyway, TP, which will be a type of any particular type, and we will return. Actually, we can just say bound equals type any. Now we're getting complicated. So let's say that this is our special type here, and we are going to return a TypeGuard of list of t. This allows us to narrow object to any particular list. So we can say current is instance lst list, and if I could spell, is instance. There we go. And all is instance x type for x in list. So we use this generic type parameter here. So we could now change this to say is list of TP x and str. Do our same narrowing there. Oh boy, here we go. Type list any has no attribute header. List any has no attribute. Oh, I see what's wrong here. This is supposed to be LST. Okay. I was down a rabbit hole. Let's change this back. I just had a typo. Right? I just had a typo. That was the only problem. Real type is built-in's list overload. What? Oh, because these are all subclasses of stir? Oh, stir is a function. Anyway, we've triggered something weird with the type checker. In theory, you can use it to make generic functions. I have failed to do so here. If we just do type? Did I fix it? Oh my goodness. Okay, this is a disaster. Anyway, that aside, if it worked correctly, you would be able to narrow this to a list of strings using a more generic function. Let's just put it back to the specific function. I don't know why I failed to make this work properly with anyway, there we go. Yeah, so this is TypeGuards. It allows you to make user space type narrowing so that you can tell the type checker more about what your arguments are doing and enforce narrowing. Now, one thing that's kind of a shortcoming of TypeGuard, and this is kind of intentional because this function can only really return booleans. It doesn't narrow in the negative case. If we do reveal type of x here, I believe it'll still say, yeah, it doesn't, even though this could only be list of strings and this could only be list of integers, now that we've narrowed the positive case, the PEP says that it doesn't narrow in the negative case. I don't know why they did that. There's probably more explanation in the PEP, but this is something to look out for. So you would also have to do elif is list of ints x, do this, else raise assertion error unreachable, or something like that. And of course you would have to implement this function, or you would figure out how to fix this function, because I don't know why I couldn't get it. But yeah, so that's kind of the one little caveat of type. Okay, so this bothered me. So I went back and looked into this, and I figured out what was wrong. And if we look at Pyrite, the other, the JavaScript Microsoft type checker, it's a lot more obvious what the problem was here. On screen so you can see it. List type stir. So my problem was I didn't actually want to bind this here because this meant that this was type stir and this was type stir. And so that's why we kind of got a nonsense result from MyPy. But if we make this just a normal type variable and instead have the type be a type, so this is the type and this is a list of values. It was a long day of recording. I'll excuse myself there. But yeah, now it works exactly as expected. So no longer a problem. So this is how you would write that generic narrowing TypeGuard. Anyway, hopefully you found this useful. If there are additional things you would like me to explain, leave a comment below or reach out to me on the various platforms. But thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next one.